Hey, what is going on, guys? Thanks for checking out this video on my sports Gematria. In this video, I'm going to go over the Final Four college basketball Saturday, April 3rd, 2021. I'm going to show you both sides of each game. It's going to be up to you to determine who you think will win based on the numbers. I encourage you to add additional information on top of this if needed to feel confident in your own pick. And if for some reason you're curious to know who I'm picking in these games, you'll have to join my Patreon where my picks are always in writing, underlined, and italicized. For more information, please read the description of this video. I wish you guys the best of luck in your picks today. Let's go ahead and get into today's games. We have Houston versus Baylor, and we have UCLA versus Gonzaga. I have my daily numbers on this side, date numerology, Gregorian, Hebrew calendar. This side is what I call my game numbers. I got the lower seed, or the high seed at, I don't know how you say it again, low seed, high seed. Well, the 2 seed, Houston's on top. Head is in the middle. Confusing myself. 1 seed, Baylor's at the bottom. And then I have 82nd Annual Championship, Lucas Oil Stadium, Men's Basketball Championship, Men's Basketball Championship Final Four. And I have Final Four written over here. So for the Baylor and the Houston game, in the last couple of videos that I've talked about this tournament, and in the last 2 videos, I specifically talked about Baylor potentially making it to the Final Four. And if we were going to see them in the Final Four, they would probably win on a day leaving 272 left for the Gregorian. They would become 27-2 for a season record, which I said if that were to happen, it would put them into the championship game, where I would suspect that they would be the fall team. They would lose and become 27-3 on the 23rd day of the 7th month for the Hebrew Civil and the NCAA final. I'm still gonna stick with that for right now. Baylor's here. They can go ahead and become 27-2 for a season record on a day leaving 272 left. Against the number 2 seed Houston, they would only have 2 losses for the season. And Houston would sit on 28 wins on a day with 28 date numerology for the Gregorian. So I do kind of like that. I do still like that. I've been talking about that for the last 2 videos that I've made for college basketball. And it just kind of makes sense a little bit. Lucas Oil Stadium sums to 226. Baylor coach, he can sit on 226 losses as he's been doing, continuing into the final game. Let's see what else is here. 1638. I mean, Houston has a way better head-to-head record against Baylor, though. So we're going to look to see what it would look like. What would we look for if Houston were going to win this game? So they would become 29-3, which is the 62nd prime number. They would get their 34th win. They would get their 12th win in a row. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's the number 1 seed Baylor versus the number 2 seed Houston, and then Houston would get their 12th win in a row to advance into the championship. That would be a narrative for Houston. Let's see here. Yeah, they're on an 11-game winning streak. Baylor's on a 4-game win streak. Yeah, so the 1 seed versus the 2 seed. It could be for the 12. For Houston to get their 12th win in a row. That would favor Houston. 593. I don't think that's a prime or anything. Oh, it is 108th prime. 108. 109 date numerology. Nothing pops out. I know 26.3, 263 is the 56th prime number. Nothing jumps out with me on that one as well. Just kind of looking at these numbers here. And 168. I know 231 is the 21st triangular number. Let's see what 883 is, if anything. 153rd prime. Okay. 883, 153rd prime. Men's basketball championship, Final Four, 153. 153 is the 17th triangular number. Is there a 17 anywhere? No. Well, let's look at the final dates. So does anything line up for Houston? So Houston, if they were to win, they would become 29-3, which is the 62nd prime. I know 29 sums to 50. 50 date numerology for the championship. 30 sums to 62. So Houston would go in with the 62nd prime on a day with 30 date numerology. 30 sums to 62. 29 sums to 50. What else? '64, 168, 39. You know, Baylor, it's their 29th game, and Houston can get their 29th win, so it can go that way. Okay, so there's stuff here for Houston for sure. There's definitely stuff here for Houston. So when you're doing this, just kind of do what I'm doing. Is you're just looking at every single number, and you're just kind of seeing if anything connects, if anything makes sense. Baylor, they would get their third loss for the season in their 33rd tournament game as a team. So that's something interesting. Houston, they could sit on 33 wins with the loss via the tournament in Baylor's 33rd tournament game. And I know 33 sums to 60. So that might be something against that might be something against 33. 33 sums to 60. Houston, it might be something against Houston. If I can complete the sentence, if I can complete a train of thought. Is there anything else? It's kind of vague, but you know, you have the 272 that I've been talking about for the last couple videos, and then you definitely have the 29. Houston can get their 29th win. Baylor 29th game. There's a 33 thing going on between the two, potentially in favor of Baylor. But Baylor, they can get that third loss, 33rd tournament, third loss for the season. 227 is the 49th prime number. Is there anything with 49? I mean, what would be the point for Houston to sit on 11? What would cause Houston to sit on 11 to end their 11 game win streak? What would cause that? Well, I guess they would get their 27th tournament loss as they end their 11 game losing streak. 11 sums to 27. 11 game winning streak, excuse me. Why would Baylor get Baylor can get their 16th head-to-head win and their 30th tourney game. 16 sums to 30. Or excuse me, 16 sums to 33. Also sums to 93. 93rd day of the Gregorian year. 39 is a reflection of 93, so that could go Houston's way as well. All right, let's look at the other game, UCLA and Gonzaga. Gonzaga. UCLA, the 11 seed. Gonzaga, the 1 seed. UCLA beat the 1 seed Michigan to advance as they got their 111th tournament win as a team. I would have to assume that they would just sit on that 111 as they face another number 1 Gonzaga versus a number 11, like 111. UCLA would get their 43rd tourney loss as a team on April 3rd, written 4/3, like 43. And Gonzaga would get their 31st win for the season. 31 is the 11th prime number. They would be getting their 31st win against the number 11 seed UCLA, as UCLA sits on that 111. Then, as I mentioned in the past video, the last video, if Gonzaga goes all the way and win it, Gonzaga, their coach, he would get his 630th win in the Final Four. Then he would get his 631st all-time win on a day leaving 361 left on the Hebrew. It's also a day with 50 date numerology on the Gregorian, and Gonzaga would get their 32nd win and become a perfect 32-0. 32 sums to 50. But there is something here for a UCLA upset and a potential Houston upset. The final game is played on a day with 14 date numerology, and so if UCLA does not get their 43rd tourney loss in the Final Four on April 3rd, 4/3, 43 the 14th prime, they could potentially get it in the championship game where there's 14 date numerology. 14 sums to 112. It would be the number 11 seed UCLA versus the number 2 seed Houston, like 112. The word Houston sums to 112. So that would be the upset narrative. But the interesting story about UCLA is they started in the first 4 of the tournament, and now they're in the final 4. So they went from the first 4 to the final 4, and I'm going to do an emphasis on the 4 and the 4, like 44. The UCLA coach, he's sitting right here to potentially get his 193rd loss for his career, which is the 44th prime number. And maybe it comes in the final 4 as UCLA completes the cycle from going from the first 4 to the final 4, emphasis on the 4s, like 44. UCLA coach can get his 193rd loss, the 44th prime number. He would sit on 22 wins. He would get his 22nd loss as a coach for UCLA. Gonzaga would sit on 22 losses as a team for the tournament. And Gonzaga, in regards to the 14 on the final day championship, 14 sums to 40. And Gonzaga, if they get their 39th win today, they can get their 40th against Baylor in the championship. Now, I mentioned Gonzaga over Baylor in the last video. I've been mentioning Baylor in the finals to lose in the last 2 videos, I think. And, I want to show you guys both sides here so you guys can make your own decision. UCLA, they could get their 112th tournament win in the championship game if they were to beat Gonzaga out. Again, 14 date numerology on the championship game. 14 sums to 112. It could potentially be UCLA, the 11 seed, versus the number 2 seed Houston, 112. Houston sums to 112. So there's definitely numbers here. And so that would be kind of confusing, right? Because if UCLA wins this game, they'd be 112 and 42 heading into this game. So yeah, no, actually that wouldn't be confusing, because then they could be 112 and 43 for a tournament record if they were to lose in the final. That's what I was trying to say. They would get their 112th in the final 4, and then they would sit on that 112 in the final game. 14-8 numerology, 14 sums to 112. They would get their 43rd tournament loss, the 14th prime number, and it could come against Houston. Houston sums to 112, the number 2 seed versus the number 11 seed, 11 like 112. So there's a UCLA narrative here for sure, 100% for sure. Same with Houston, 100% for sure. I've just been talking about Baylor for the last couple of videos, and I mentioned the Gonzaga over Baylor in the last video. Um, I still kind of like it. So hopefully both sides here that I'm showing you helps. You can make a narrative for both sides, so don't feel too distressed if you can't make up your mind on which side you want to go on. It's no big deal. It's like this for every game. Every single game, you can make a narrative for either side, so don't sweat it. And just make your best judgment, you know? You'll probably be right. No worries. If not, flip a coin. Nah, you'll be fine. There's numbers for both sides for sure, but just go whatever you think is best in your eyes. Thanks for watching, guys.